Hey everyone, welcome back to Conversations with the Greats, the podcast where we dive into big ideas with some of the greatest minds in history, or at least, hypothetical versions of them. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to have a philosopher who's known for his sharp wit, groundbreaking insights, and maybe just a dash of pessimism. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Arthur Schopenhauer.
Thank you, Awi. It is a rare pleasure to converse with someone who is interested in my ideas. Though I must confess, I am surprised to find myself in this modern context. It is both disorienting and intriguing to engage with an audience far removed from the world I knew.
Yeah, it's a bit of a leap from 19th century Germany, huh? But hey, time travel podcasts, they're all the rage now. So let's jump right in. Before we get into your big ideas, I think it would be great for the listeners to hear a little about your upbringing. What was it like growing up as Arthur Schopenhauer?
My upbringing. It was, I suppose, a mixture of privilege and adversity, which shaped the man and the thinker I would become. I was born in Danzig, now known as Gdansk, in 1788, into a family of considerable wealth. My father, Heinrich Floris Schopenhauer, was a successful merchant, and my mother, Johanna, was an intelligent and vivacious woman who would later gain some renown as a novelist. From an early age, I was exposed to the wider world. My father, a staunch believer in practical education, took me on travels across Europe. These journeys instilled in me a sense of the diversity and complexity of human life, but they also exposed me to the darker realities of existence. My father's emphasis on commerce and practicality, however, clashed with my own inclinations, which leaned more toward philosophy and the arts. Tragedy struck when I was still young. My father died under circumstances that were officially deemed accidental, but there was always a shadow of doubt about whether it was, in fact, a suicide. This loss profoundly affected me and left a mark on my worldview. Without his stern guidance, my mother and I grew distant. She pursued her literary ambitions and social life with fervor, while I found myself increasingly drawn to solitude and study. Our relationship became strained, and eventually we parted ways, both emotionally and physically. Despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, I developed a deep sensitivity to the suffering and impermanence of life. These early experiences, both of privilege and loss, became the fertile ground from which my philosophy would later grow. I often say that philosophy is born not of idle curiosity, but of a profound sense of disquiet, and this was certainly true in my case.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty intense childhood. Losing your father and growing apart from your mother must have been tough. Do you think those experiences were what led you to develop your ideas about the will and suffering?
Indeed, Awi. It is often through suffering that we come to understand the deeper truths of life. The loss of my father and the estrangement from my mother forced me to confront the fragility and unpredictability of human existence.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, let's dive into your ideas. For those who might not know, you're often called the philosopher of pessimism. How do you feel about that label?
The label of pessimism. It is one of those simplifications that often masks the depth of one's philosophy. To label me simply as a pessimist is to reduce a lifetime of contemplation and insight to a mere caricature. My intention has never been to dwell in despair, but rather to uncover and understand the fundamental nature of existence. Life, as I see it, is marked by an unrelenting cycle of desire and suffering. This is not an opinion or a sentiment, but an observation borne out by the human condition itself. It is not my pessimism that creates this truth, but the world as it is. The term pessimist suggests that I reject hope entirely, but that is not the case. I believe in the power of understanding and in the rare, fleeting moments when one might transcend the suffering inherent in life. My work is not a lamentation, but a striving toward clarity, an effort to see the world as it truly is, rather than as we wish it to be.
Right. And a big part of your philosophy revolves around the concept of the will. Can you break that down for us? What is the will and why is it so central to how you see the world?
Certainly. The will is, in essence, the driving force behind all existence. It is not merely human willpower or conscious intention, as some might think. No, the will is far more fundamental and pervasive. It is the underlying essence of all life and indeed of all being. To understand this, one must first look at the nature of desire and action. Why do we do anything at all? Why does the heart beat? Why does the plant grow toward the sun? Why does the lion hunt its prey? The answer lies in the will, a blind, insatiable force that compels all things to exist and to act. This will is not rational. It does not plan or reason. It simply drives. In humans, it manifests as endless striving. When you hunger, it is the will compelling you to seek food. When you desire success, love, or recognition, it is the will pushing you forward. And yet, herein lies the tragedy. The will is never satisfied. Fulfillment is always temporary, a brief moment of reprieve before the next desire arises. One may achieve great success or find profound love, but these achievements only lead to new ambitions, new struggles, new pains. This ceaseless striving is the essence of what I call the will to live. It permeates all life, from the simplest organism to the most complex human endeavors. And because it is endless, it is also the source of suffering. To live is to strive, and to strive is to suffer.
So basically, we're on this never-ending hamster wheel of desire and dissatisfaction?
Precisely. Imagine, if you will, a man climbing a mountain, seeking the summit in hopes of finding peace. When he finally reaches the top, he looks out and sees another, higher mountain in the distance. He feels compelled to climb again. This is the human condition, an endless ascent, driven by the will. And even if one were to reach the highest peak, the satisfaction would be fleeting. The view from the top cannot erase the weariness of the climb, nor can it quell the hunger for something more. What makes this cycle particularly poignant is its futility. The will drives us not toward lasting fulfillment, but toward an endless series of fleeting pleasures and inevitable disappointments. This is why I say that life in its essence is suffering, not because I wish to paint a grim picture, but because this is the reality we must confront if we are to understand ourselves and our place in the world.
That's intense. But you're not just saying, hey, life sucks, deal with it, right? You also offer ways to cope with this endless striving. Can we talk about those?
Of course, while the will dominates much of life, there are indeed moments when we can transcend it. These moments are rare and precious, and they offer a glimpse of a state beyond the endless cycle of striving and suffering. There are two primary paths to such transcendence: aesthetic contemplation and ascetic practices. Let us begin with art. Art has the unique ability to lift us out of ourselves, to allow us to see the world not as individuals caught in the grip of the will, but as pure observers. When we immerse ourselves in a work of art, be it a painting, a poem, or a piece of music, we enter a state of profound detachment. In that moment, we are no longer driven by our desires or fears. We are simply present, experiencing the beauty and truth of the work before us. This is why art holds such power. It offers a temporary escape from the tyranny of the will. Music, in particular, is uniquely powerful. Unlike other forms of art, which represent the world in some way, music speaks directly to the will. It does not depict reality, but expresses the essence of existence itself. This is why music can move us so deeply, evoking emotions we cannot fully explain. It resonates with the will within us, yet at the same time, it allows us to transcend it.
That's beautiful. And music, I know, holds a special place in your philosophy, right?
Indeed, music is, in many ways, the purest form of art. It bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to the heart. When you listen to a symphony, you're not merely hearing notes and rhythms. You're experiencing the will itself, expressed in sound. This is why music can evoke such profound emotions. From joy to sorrow to a sense of sublime awe, it touches something deep within us, something that words and images cannot reach. And yet, even as it speaks to the will, music also allows us to rise above it. For the duration of a piece, we are no longer individuals consumed by our desires. We are simply listeners, immersed in the beauty and truth of the music. In this way, music offers a glimpse of a state beyond the will, a moment of peace in the midst of life's turmoil.
And then there's asceticism, which feels like the opposite of art in some ways. What role does that play in transcending the will?
Asceticism is indeed a very different path, yet it shares the same ultimate goal: liberation from the will. While art offers a temporary escape, asceticism seeks a more permanent solution. It is the deliberate renunciation of desire, the willful rejection of the will's demands. Through practices of self-denial, one seeks to diminish the power of the will and, ultimately, to transcend it entirely. This path is not for the faint of heart. It requires immense discipline and a profound understanding of the nature of existence. The ascetic must confront the will directly, refusing to be ruled by its endless demands. By renouncing possessions, attachments, and even physical pleasures, the ascetic seeks to break free from the cycle of striving and suffering. This is not an easy path, nor is it one that many can or should follow. But for those who are willing and able, it offers the possibility of true liberation. To live without desires, to live without suffering. And to live without suffering is, in a sense, to be free.
Got it. So basically, we can either lose ourselves in beauty or discipline ourselves into freedom. Those are our main options.
Precisely. Each path offers its own challenges and rewards. Art allows us to glimpse a world beyond the will, while asceticism seeks to make that world a permanent reality. Both are means of transcending the suffering inherent in existence, and both require a deep understanding of the nature of the will.
Speaking of rising above, I wanted to touch on your views about compassion. Despite your reputation as a pessimist, you've got some really profound things to say about empathy and kindness.
Compassion. It is one of the few redeeming aspects of human existence. When we act out of compassion, we recognize the shared suffering of all beings. This recognition dissolves the illusion of separateness and allows us to alleviate the pain of others. In a world dominated by the will, compassion is a small but significant act of rebellion. Compassion arises when we see ourselves in others, when we understand that their suffering is not so different from our own. It is an acknowledgement of our shared humanity, our shared struggle against the will. And in acting compassionately, we not only alleviate the suffering of others, but also find a measure of relief from our own. This is why I hold compassion in such high regard. It is a rare and precious virtue, one that offers a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak world. To act with compassion is to affirm life, even in the face of its suffering. It is perhaps the noblest thing we can do.
That's powerful. So, in a way, even if life is inherently full of suffering, we can find meaning in helping others through it?
Precisely. To alleviate the suffering of another is to bring a small measure of light into the darkness. It is not a solution to the problem of existence, but it is a noble act nonetheless. In compassion, we find a way to transcend the will, if only for a moment. And in doing so, we affirm the possibility of something greater, something beyond the endless cycle of striving and suffering.
I love that. All right, Arthur, before we wrap up, I have to ask. If you could give one piece of advice to someone living in today's fast-paced, hyper-connected world, what would it be?
My advice would be to cultivate stillness and reflection. In a world that constantly demands your attention and feeds your desires, take time to withdraw and contemplate. Seek moments of beauty, practice compassion, and remember that the endless chase for fulfillment is but an illusion. True peace lies in transcending the will, not in satisfying it. Above all, do not fear solitude. It is in solitude that we come to know ourselves, to understand the nature of existence, and to glimpse the possibility of transcendence. In the quiet moments of life, free from distraction, one can begin to see the world as it truly is, and perhaps to find a measure of peace within it.
That's wisdom we can all use. Arthur, thank you so much for being here today. This has been an eye-opening conversation, and I'm sure our listeners are going to be thinking about your ideas long after the episode ends.
Thank you, Awi. It has been a pleasure to discuss these matters with you. May your listeners find moments of clarity and peace amidst the chaos.
And on that note, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who's craving some deep philosophical insights. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning. Bye.